Welcome to She Sells Radio. I am so excited for this episode today, and I've got a really special interview for you with a client, with a phenomenal leader and entrepreneur. Her name is Leslie Thornton. She's the founder and CEO of Hypnosis for Permanent Weight Loss, which is an international e-health coaching program for people seeking mental freedom from food, body, and weight. And she is also the host of the Hypnosis for Permanent Weight Loss podcast, which has gotten about 800,000 downloads, which, by the way, if you are not a podcaster and you don't know, that is an insanely popular podcast. So she is absolutely incredible. And I think if you know any of my personal story at all, then you'll know that what I firmly believe is how we do one thing is how we do everything. And years ago, I created, I would call it a prison for myself, not just financially, and with my earnings ability, but also with my body and obsessive dieting and eating. And what helped me finally break free from that cycle with my body is also what freed me financially. So I think we're going to talk about that today. And I think it's going to be so powerful to talk with Leslie about how she empowers her clients to free themselves from obsessive food, body, and weight thoughts, because it really is the same approach that's going to help you skyrocket your sales, your business, and your income. Leslie is also a client. She's a member of my high-level mastermind and just an incredible woman who I'm loving working with. So we're going to speak with her a bit about her experience in our community as well. Leslie, welcome to She Sells Radio. I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Elise. And I think that's why I resonated so much with She Sells, in your program, because I know that the same principles, that freed me from food, body, and weight, they translate to every aspect of life. So it's been a great journey with you.
Oh, thank you. Well, it really is universal. And I know you do a lot of work with executives and high performers as well. And I think a lot of people struggle with these things secretly too. I know I can relate to that, where for so much of my life and my career, I felt like I had to have this image of just having everything put together on the outside. And I created that, and I created this image that I would portray to the world of a certain type of physical look. And like, I looked like I had it all put together, but I was struggling so much inside with things that I didn't realize were tied to deeper emotional issues. It was more, for me, it was like I did compulsive eating. I dieted. I had an eating disorder, anorexia, like for years growing up. And so all the things. And I never got free from those until I actually got under the hood to figure out what was really going on. And then that transformation, it didn't just, like I said in the intro, it didn't just free me from the body things, but it really opened up a lot in my business as well. So yes. I'd love to just start with your story. I think it's so powerful to hear, why you felt so inspired to bring this work into the world and what your own personal backstory was like in this area.
Yeah, similar to you, I was just always kind of on the outside, doing and being successful at everything that I put my mind to. I was, a nurse in the ICU and, did everything that on paper would look successful. And, I was dieting from a really young age. 8 years old was my first, experience of, I was on Slim Fast shakes by 4th grade and Weight Watchers by 8th grade. And just kind of, I think the emotionality was being masked by the dieting. When my weight was down, I was so happy and felt worthy. And if my weight was up, I felt miserable and depressed and terrible. And I had kind of a wake up call one day where I was like, okay, so based on this, it looks like probably 80% or more of my life, I'm going to be miserable and depressed because the amount of time I was actually at my goal weight was, minimal. And so it was like, something's got to change. So I kind of said to myself, I'm either going to have to learn how to be fat and happy for the rest of my life, or I have to figure this out. Like, how come some people don't struggle with this and I do?
Can I just pause you super quick on that? Because I think that's so important, Leslie, what you just said, asking that higher level question, of how come, like, this isn't universal for everyone, right? So some people don't struggle with this. I do. I think that is such an empowering thing that we can start to ask ourselves to break free of whatever self-imposed prison we put on ourselves in, whether it's with food, body, and weight, whether it's with money, like realizing we talk about this in the coaching program a lot. Just because you think a thought, it doesn't mean it's necessarily true, even though it may feel very true for you and your experience. But if not everyone struggles with this thing, maybe there's another way. Maybe there's a different path. Maybe there's a higher level approach to this. So I just wanted to pause, because you saying that and hearing that that was part of your journey and part of the transformation, I think is so important. So keep going, but I want to encourage everyone listening to start asking themselves those higher level questions like that.
Definitely. And on that same note, I actually bought into the belief system that I was a food addict, like through and through, was addicted to food. And then I came across someone who, she was bulimic and like really severe eating disorder stuff going on. And she, became a normal eater after that. And as soon as I saw that someone was able to do that, it was like, my brain is like, well, then why couldn't I be able to do that too? And that's when things started getting shaky. Like I couldn't stay consistent with the food addiction program I was following because my belief system was shaking. And because I had that higher level of awareness, it was like, oh, it's because I don't buy into that belief I'm a food addict anymore. Okay, well then what's the new belief and who's the new me I want to create? What's the new relationship I want to have? And then what's the coaching program that's going to program my unconscious mind to be in alignment with that, to be the type of free eater, normal eater that I am today.
So you just mentioned what coaching program will help me reprogram my unconscious mind. How did you even know that that would work? Was this something that you were introduced to early on, or was this something you found along the way after trying all of the other things, the diets, the approaches? How did you even get opened up to that?
So I kind of fell into my neurolinguistic programming certification in 2015. I first found hypnosis in 2011, and I was very skeptical. So I'm a nurse by trade. So science is something I highly value and appreciate. And when I found hypnosis, it was like, what is this? If this actually worked, why wouldn't they have taught me this in nursing school? They now do teach it in healthcare, but they didn't when I was going to school. But I was so desperate, I was willing to try anything on. So I did self-hypnosis, and I actually woke up the next day and felt more free from food. So that was kind of the experience that I needed to show that I could, change something overnight, through that experience, which just kind of opened me up. So then I kind of landed into a coaching certification program, and I just fell madly in love with everything that had to do with coaching. I couldn't get enough of it. And during the coach certification, I had to pick a niche. And I was working with a career coach at the time because I didn't know what I wanted to do outside of nursing. And she was like, well, what's something major you've overcome? And I was like, well, I experienced this hypnosis. It completely changed my relationship with food, body, and weight. She was like, you should probably do that. So then I started coaching other people just as like part of the certification in hypnosis for weight loss, and just kind of coaching about the hypnosis. And I had a practice client one day say, Leslie, I don't want you to teach me about hypnosis. I just want you to do it. And it was phone coaching. And I was like, well, I don't know if this is going to work, but let me just do what I did to myself. We're practicing here. And she came back the next week and she was like, whatever you did last week, do it again. I've never felt more free around food in my life. So then I started Googling hypnotherapists that work over the phone. Does this actually work? Yes, yes, yes. And then that's actually when I landed upon Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. And then that's where I could understand where the science met spirituality and how this work actually worked.
Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Can you help debunk hypnosis for anyone listening who has that same conditioning? We talk a lot about the power of the subconscious here, but we haven't gone deep into hypnosis as a tool. It's not something that's in my tool belt to use with clients. So I'd love if you could share a little bit more about what it is, why it works, and help share some of the science behind that too.
Definitely. So with hypnosis versus guided meditation, for example, meditation is just to quiet the mind and kind of bring relaxation to the body. Hypnosis is for one specific goal. So weight loss, smoking cessation, test anxiety. And it's basically the process of just quieting down the conscious part of the mind. So that's thinking all day long, and I have to be here at this time, and my to-do list and everything else going on, which then brings about the subconscious mind becomes more awake and aware. So 95% of the results that we get in our life is based on what's going on in the unconscious mind. So all your beliefs, your behaviors, automatic habits. And so when the unconscious mind is more in that, receiving mode, that's when we can actually put in messages that are more affirming that are in, the direction of where it is that we want to go. So during the day, if someone starts a diet, they say, I don't want to eat sugar. I'm not going to eat any cookies. But then the cookies show up and it's like, oh, I want to lose weight. And then there's this battle. So what hypnosis essentially does is makes it so there's no longer that fight. And it's like we have an agreement around what it is that we want. We have the mindfulness in that moment to make a choice. Do I actually want to eat this right now or not? And then we can go from there. So all that scary addiction kind of feeling and I can't control myself gets to go away. And we get to be empowered around the decisions we make around eating.
You said the word freedom a couple of times here as you've been talking, and I think that's so important. You mentioned your client who said, I've never felt so free around food, and even just you sharing, getting people out of that kind of, if someone's listening and not watching, they don't see the hands, but we're kind of doing like, hands beating against each other, like that inner battle, that inner conflict. It is so freeing. I want to talk about, so there's obviously the emotional impact that comes from doing this work and from reprogramming the subconscious and that feeling of freedom in an area that maybe used to feel so constricting. And I think, again, someone listening could take this and apply this to food, body, and weight. They could apply it to money and business. They could apply it to, no doubt, relationships. So in your own journey, you said you started to feel differently and fall in love with the process. What were some of the actual things that happened and manifested for you in your life as a result of doing this work? So someone's going to be listening and say, well, feeling better is great. But I want to actually lose weight and keep it off, or I want to actually grow my business and make more money. So what were some of the things that transpired physically in your world, in your life, when you started doing this work?
Yeah. So my weight has been the same, for the last 4 years with no dieting, with no intentional exercise to lose any kind of weight. And it really came with kind of like claiming and owning the way that I wanted to eat, for me. And this, I feel like it's in alignment with the work that you do. It was like, how does an elegant, abundant woman, wealthy woman, like, how is she, what's her relationship with food like? And I observed a lot of women in my life that I really admired, leaders and whatever, and they weren't fixated on how perfect their bodies looked. And they just looked well put together and they just had peace and they just, so just getting to model off that and just have that sanity around food. Also, the fear went away, right? Of, again, just feeling like, oh my God, if I, my situation was at the point where I had to like put locks around cabinets to not go in because I was that afraid of myself going in and eating all the sugar, that I could find in the house. I could have any foods in the house at any time and I could forget it's even there. And that's a typical result of my clients is that they'll have, a carton of ice cream in the freezer and they'll forget it's there. And previously it's like they know where it is every single second of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I realized we didn't fully answer the question that you asked before about how did I know about the coaching program? So it's just right. So I just wanted to circle back on that because I think it will be helpful, to everyone that's hearing. It's just like getting that repetition through repetition and emotion is how we change the unconscious mind. So the 5 people we hang out with the most is, going to be who we become. And so if I'm hanging out with a coaching group full of people who believe that they are food addicts and they're weighing and measuring every ounce of their food, right, then that's going to be as far as I'm able to expand. Right. But what I coach my clients on is like, consider the fact that if you're not able to stay consistent on your diet like you were in the past, that it's no longer in alignment with who you are now and what your values are currently. So let's get clear on what that is. Right. And then let's put you in a container so that you can feel inner peace. You can feel, day-to-day satisfaction. You can breathe easier and feel good about the actions you're taking in your day-to-day life.
I love that so much. And gosh, the example you gave of the locks on the cabinets, it's so visceral and it's so powerful. And I know I've been in, I haven't done that specifically, but I remember just in my own journey in this area, like the amount of energy that I would put into thinking about food, planning food, not eating food, restricting, beating myself up no matter what. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think it's so true that whatever we focus on expands. So if we're in a lot of resistance, right, that creates that tension, that resistance, and we're like, I'm not going to think about that. I'm not going to do it. But that's where we're putting all of our energy. The subconscious is just going to keep cycling the same thoughts about the same thing. And we're going to continue the obsession and the unhealthy behaviors. And then there's shame compounded on it too. So it sounds like literally just like this process that you work with, which again, it's not exactly what I do with my clients, but it's aligned in terms of the approach. And I love that about it. It's such a different approach to achieving the goal, and one that creates more freedom. I have a follow-up to that, but anything else you want to add onto that before we go on?
Yeah, I had a thought and I feel like it just left me, but yeah, I can't remember. It's gone right now, but I hope it comes back because it was very powerful.
Oh my gosh, it'll come back. So let me ask you.
I know what it was.
Oh, ready? Yeah, go ahead.
So the correlation, talk about all of the mental, power that goes into, I mastered getting that perfect body, right? So I'm 5'2" and I was 108 pounds and was eating no sugar, no flour, like perfectionism all the way for 3 years. No sugar, no flour, no snacking, no alcohol, like just the extreme of the extreme. And I had the awareness because I still had my business. I was traveling. I traveled for 2.5 years internationally, and I was running my business at the same time, and was following this food program until I couldn't anymore. But I also had this thing with the business where it was like, if I don't get out of this, putting all of my mental energy into food, body, and weight, I'm never going to be able to hit my business goals.
Yeah.
Right. So it was kind of like
really
also
quick
a choice.
On that. Sorry, Liz, was the business, were you leading this business at the time, or was it a different business that you
It was a different business. I was coaching
Okay.
coaches more in business. I initially started with hypnosis for weight loss and then went back to it several years ago. So it was like, I really got to figure this out and make a new decision. And I decided to, it's like whatever it takes. I want to be able to serve the world doing this coaching business and sharing what I know. But if I'm constantly stressed out about this, I'm not going to be able to put my full focus and attention on service. Yeah. So that was also a big part of the journey as well.
I think that's huge. I think that's so huge. And I can imagine perhaps some of that inner tension too, of like, if I understood you correctly, you went into hypnosis for permanent weight loss, and then you were still experiencing some of the restrictive behaviors and some of the obsession.
So it was the hypnosis first that got me free from all of the fears and like I was not afraid of food anymore. I was no longer stressed out about parties. I didn't have the fear of being on my 600-pound life one day, which was like all I could have ever asked for.
I remember. Wow. I watched that. I had not thought about that until now, but yep. Okay.
Right.
I remember.
And then, but still dealing with some of the sugar stuff. Like I found that, so my journey kind of continued, and that's when I ended up in the food addiction program. I did isogenics for a long time, but I still found there was that like sugar addiction kind of thing, which is why I think that. But then I realized, kind of like you were saying in the beginning, like that it was underneath it all was these emotional aspects that were not touched on. So that's when I really like got the full solution, if you will, was having the emotional mastery, having the personalized coaching, right? Having the community support as well as the hypnosis, which is how we have the guarantee that people have the freedom by the end of our program.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I want to talk about how self-love has played into your journey. This is something, even this morning, I was thinking about it and I was meditating on it and just thinking about in my own life, every time I've experienced true freedom in an area that previously felt so challenging, again, whether body, whether money, whether anything, it came from an energy of self-love. It came from actually loving myself into a better version of myself rather than beating myself up or forcing myself to do something or looking at what was wrong. And I'm just really curious how that has played into your own journey, and then also how you see that playing out with your clients.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. When I first started the business, the tagline was love yourself to freedom.
So that's perfectly aligned. Okay. Wow. I love that.
So 100%. And I think it's just a forever ongoing journey in my experience. The most recent aspect of that. And as you were saying that to me, it's like to love yourself. It's like really deeply listening to myself. Those moments when I was like making that decision of like, okay, it's food addiction, program and sobriety that way for the rest of my life, or it's, achieving these other things that I've always wanted to have as well, and finding a way to make both work. Um, and really just kind of taking the time to be like, this is really where my energy is. Vision boarding was a big part of that for me. I remember at that time I did a vision board workshop in Australia, and I had this huge picture of a cheeseburger on the vision board. And I was like, I just want to eat a damn cheeseburger, and it was just like, and trusting like that is my truth. Right. So taking that time to listen and actually self-reflect, and then say like, no, this is just what it is for me. And then what actions am I going to take to align with that feels very self-loving. That, and also just studying the thoughts, right? And just really looking at like, when I'm feeling anxious, when I'm feeling stressed, what conversation am I engaging with around myself, and I'm a failure. And for my clients, this is why, I guess we could look at almost like exposure therapy with these foods that we've had on the forbidden, list for however many years. Sugar is bad and dairy is bad. And okay, well, when they eat those things, so perfectionism on a diet helps them to avoid, and it's another way of numbing, right, the feelings of them being bad because they ate a bad food, right? And so it's like, well, let's actually let you have these foods, and let's have you experience the bad that you're feeling as a result of eating these things that you had on the forbidden list. And it's going to bring up all those things. Okay, well, now we can actually use emotional mastery and belief change to turn those thoughts and feelings around, so that even if you make mistakes in life, and even if you overeat one day, and even if you don't just go down that rabbit hole of worst case scenario thinking and whatever that makes the cycle so scary that has you just start another diet again in time.
This is so powerful. There's so much that you just said that I want to go a little bit deeper into. One of the things I want to ask you about, and I think you're, even just as you talk, it's like, if someone's really listening and paying attention, they're going to get that you're a woman who has developed the ability to be very aware of your thoughts, right? That concept of metacognition, which is like, we can think about what we're thinking about. I know in my own life, I spent most of my life not aware that that was even a thing. And I always listened to the voice in my head that you talked about before, and I took it as truth. And I didn't want to sit by myself. I remember this is actually how I came across podcasting, was I was in such a bad place in my life, and I knew there were so many changes that needed to happen, but I didn't want to sit in the silence and actually feel the feelings or listen to the thoughts. So I discovered podcasting, and it was perhaps a healthier numbing behavior than some of the others, but it was still avoidance.
Yes.
And if someone is really scared right now to sit down and feel the feelings and think about the thoughts they've been thinking, how do they get past that fear?
Yeah, I was way too scared myself for a very long time. And it was always hiring coaches, to just, because when I invested my time and energy and money into a container where, I'm saying like, yes, I'll do the work. I will do what they say to get the result that I'm saying that I want. Then that would kind of, support me with that, and any, support they had in their program, somatic work or whatever, to have someone kind of be with me as I initially would face some of the fears or the emotions. And then over time, and this is, what I always want for my clients, is that you feel safe enough to do it on your own, and realize like, hey, on the other side of this emotionality is a breakthrough and like the best feeling ever. So you just got to sit with it. What heart math is 90 seconds, of just being with a feeling or a thought before you can break through.
Say that one more time, 90 seconds.
Yeah. 90 seconds of just being with a painful feeling that comes from a disempowering thought is all that you need. Just breathe through it and stay with it, and it'll pass.
Yeah.
And, when it comes to eating or any numbing activity, this is when we're reaching for the food unconsciously. And so people come to me and they're saying, why can't I stop eating? And it's late night eating, and this is the problem. And that's what we see on the surface. But it's like, no, what's actually happening right before that craving hits? Or did you just have an argument with your partner? Are you feeling, all these things coming up? And how can we be with that aspect of you for just a little bit of time? And then you can think clearly after you do so, and then, rinse and repeat. And then we're not eating, that way anymore. And then it gives people that control back of being like, oh, it's not my eating. If I just address the
Mm.
feeling, it
Mhm.
has, and so that whole story and that paradigm of like, it really is the food, it really is the sugar. It's like, well, let's question that a little bit
Yes. Oh my
because it's
gosh.
not.
Yes. I
Mhm.
can't remember. I think I maybe said this in our mastermind group or somewhere else, but I found this pair of earrings that I love that say question everything.
Mm,
Like they're like very nice earrings. I didn't buy them right off the
nice.
bat, but I'm like, I'm going to wear those earrings because I think that is such a good approach to life is question everything. Is it really the food?
Everything.
Is it really the sugar or what's going on underneath the hood? And you said, oh, okay. Yeah. There's a few more things here that I want to unpack with you that I think are so good. Um, Helping someone understand, like you just said, if you can sit with that emotion for 90 seconds, that it will pass. And I'm assuming that's an average and it could be a little more, a little less. But it's so powerful when you start to realize too that you can make it through and that the body gets addicted to these emotions, right? The cortisol, the stress hormones. And I was even noticing that this morning in my meditation. It was like a really beautiful meditation. And then I had a thought pop up that triggered a feeling of some grief and some guilt tied to the loss of our dog a couple weeks ago. And I was like, oh, it's really interesting to notice that there's a part of me that is addicted to feelings of guilt and bringing back up the grief in the middle of this moment. Because people will do a meditation, or maybe, I don't know with you, if they ever do a hypnosis and they're like, oh, like it was painful. Like sometimes it feels painful, right? Stuff comes up and we think we're doing it wrong. What would you say to that? Are we doing it wrong or are we actually doing it right? Because we're bringing to the surface these things that may be dormant underneath that otherwise we would numb.
Exactly that. It's like the
Mhm.
fastest way through is through. I had a previous coach that would say when any, challenging thing in the business would come up for him, like he would just sit down and be like, how hard and how fast can I feel this painful feeling?
Ooh, yeah.
I used to, because, being with my emotions was not something that was, trained to me as a kid. There wasn't a lot of emotional space for us growing up. So I kind of had to learn it. But I spent 30 days in my meditation in Thailand of intentionally being like, I'm going to sit here until I think of something sad enough that I actually
Wow.
cry, just because I
Wow.
wanted to get practice with feeling, safe enough to actually let emotion come out. And,
Mm,
yeah, but every single time, I mean, I think every single person has had a good cry at some point,
yeah.
and it's like there's that bliss, that feeling like like the air gets tingly and there's that like, right, we feel more centered and grounded, which is also how you feel after hypnosis, and it's like that's the space of creation, that's the space of healing,
Mm,
that's the space of ideas getting to come in from inspiration. Yeah, with my
wow.
meditation practice, I remember, when I was really strict, I got trained in tantric meditation for a couple of years with an awesome teacher. Um, and so just sitting there and, I'd start every single time with a to-do list as long as anybody's, and I'd come off there like, oh, just like, I want to send a thank you note to that person, or I just want to tell someone I love them. And
Mm,
one of the thank you notes was to a podcast. His name is Thomas Miller, Subconscious Mind Mastery podcast. I've been on it a
mm,
couple times and just wanted to thank him because it was during my time of like becoming a coach and starting my business. And I ended up running a Sedona Vortex energy meditation tour with him and 25 of his podcast listeners from all over the world with like just really high vibe people. I'm
yeah.
teaching NLP to these people and,
Wow.
they're coming to me and I'm, 26 years old. And like that came through meditation along with a download to leave my nursing job along with, so it's just like, if we don't take ownership over getting support with these aspects of life, whether they're money, food, etc., um, we're really missing out on, these messages that are wanting to come through,
Yeah.
through creation. So,
Oh,
how can we get ourselves in that kind of space on a regular basis?
yes. Yeah. I want to follow up on a couple of things you said there. One, I think, and you said this a little bit earlier, and I got caught up in what you're saying, but I want to come back to the power of hiring a coach. Um, and my own experience in this area in particular of overcoming, or maybe not overcoming, just I don't want to use that language, shifting my paradigm in the area of food, body, and weight. There was so much freedom that came from finally hiring someone and vocalizing that it was something that was going on because there'd been so much shame and so much guilt. And I bet so many of your clients who are those high performers, high achievers, you've got executives and companies, it's like they feel like they have to project that image of having it all together. And there is this part of their lives that they feel shame and guilt around. And just in the process of, my own experience was in the process of verbalizing it and saying, this is something I need support with. It was like the transformation started then.
Yes.
It really did. It's like it lost its power. It totally lost its power. So I think that's really important. There's something I'm going to come back to, something else that you said. I'm going to remember. I'm going to come back to it. In the meantime, I want to ask you about perfectionism. You mentioned that a little bit ago, and I think that's really an interesting topic to unpack for people. And I want you to talk a little bit more about it. I could see how, of course, it's clear how it shows up with food and with body and with weighing everything, measuring everything. I did Weight Watchers too back in the day, and I don't think quite as young as you, but I did it maybe in my late teens or 20s. Just continued the compulsive behavior with that because everything had to be perfect. I also see it show up in people's businesses where it's like, I can't make a mistake. I can't, especially with money, right? We get way into perfectionism with money. That's huge fear of making a mistake. What if I do it wrong? Not that you don't want to know what's going on with your money, but I think I've seen tendencies with my clients too, and just people in the community. And I used to have this fear of like tracking obsessively, like really being in a lot of fear around it. Speak more to perfectionism, how it's a numbing behavior, because I think we can use it as like, oh, I'm just a perfectionist. It's almost like an excuse for things. So speak more to that and how you help people kind of navigate out of that path.
Yeah. Well, there's the authentic self, and then we all have parts of ourselves. So when we come into the world, we're born as blank slates. Our unconscious mind is just a blank piece of paper. And then different experiences happen that has us then kind of have part of me wants this and part. So with parts work, there's different aspects like the perfectionistic part, right? But then there's like the indulger part, there's the critical part, there's the, victim part. So from my experience, when it came to food, body, and weight, kind of twofold, but the first was kind of looking we all learn from our parents, and a woman learns how to be a woman through her mother. And so my mom ate, in my opinion, perfectly. Right. So when I found this, and it was like, that was the right way. And she was able to maintain this thin body her whole life. And so it was kind of like my unconscious mind was searching for that my entire life. So then when I found this food addiction program, it was having me eat exactly the way I saw. So I was like, I found it. Eureka. This is the answer. But then realizing like that was an empowered choice that I made. Right. That was a choice that I made out of shoulds and guilt and shame. And if I don't, then something bad's going to happen, which is not sustainable. Right. We're going to fall off track with that. And then, just kind of also seeing that entire food addiction program was geared towards having the person who's doing that program, if it came from, and just the business model itself, if you are attracting people who are buying into a belief that they are food addicts and disempowered, right, then, okay, that's already, going to set people up for failure, in my opinion. Right. Yeah. But who it was modeled towards was the perfectionist part of you. So all these people's perfectionist part, which dopamine hits, work when it's like, oh, that my perfectionist part's in the driver's seat all the time. And so we get that high. Right. And, and now the scale's going down and we get the high again. Yeah. But then what happens when a major life event happens or whatever? Okay, well, now that falls off and we've been numbing out, and we haven't been actually working on the other parts, right? Now the critical part's really loud, and now and then you've just got this circus of, emotionality that's just going everywhere. And that's when people have mental breakdown and people end up in the, in an insane whatever. And then they get diagnoses as being bipolar or schizophrenic, and of course some diagnoses are real, but sometimes when I talk to people, it's just like, no, it's just these parts were in overdrive and we had no idea what to do with the emotionality underneath. So I find that again, through hypnosis and all the other emotional mastery NLP tools we use, it's like we get to build relationships with these parts of ourselves because they're all trying to help us, right? They don't want us to fail. They don't want us to be abandoned. They want us to stay, and belong as part of the community. That's what they're for. So how can we build a healthier relationship with these parts and be like, hey, maybe I can, what if I have just like a little bit of that, ice cream? And like, would it be okay if like you could allow me to like test that out and like trust me that I'm going to be able to support myself through this, these tools that I'm learning to feel better faster? Like, would you be okay with that? And it's like, okay, now we have agreement, right? And now we can kind of keep moving forward. So, and then it's kind of through that process, you get clear and clear on what is like my inner truth versus what is a part that's just saying, you have to do this. And right, coming from the fear, scarcity, and lack. And the more that you're listening to the actual authentic self and not the perfectionist part saying, whatever it says, and which causes black and white thinking and all or nothing, right? And that's where, the binge cycle and then the starvation cycle, right? There's just all of that, dieting and then not dieting, and just those two different places that people are just constantly up and down in these major ways. We want to smooth that out, right? And kind of accept our humanity and emotionality. And hey, we're not going to be perfect with our eating every single day. And what if that's okay? And what if you can trust every decision that you make, including eating too much sugar one day? And what if you can learn how to trust yourself that you're going to listen to your body after and take care of yourself after? And maybe that all led you to the next amazing thing that was supposed to show up on your path. So having trust in every decision and having faith that everything is happening for you, and just getting to enjoy the journey and see what shows up along the way.
That's so beautiful. The core underlying message of She Sells in our brand is trust yourself. And I love that you shared that, because I think that is one of the most empowering choices we can ever make for ourselves is I'm just going to trust myself. And the question you said of what if I could trust every decision I make? So much freedom in that, right? So much freedom. I want to ask about, I'm trying to be mindful of time. This is so good. Everything you shared. I do want to ask the authentic self and getting in touch with your inner truth. To me, that is self-love. That is beautiful guidance in that. How do we do that? Is that where we have to be willing to sit through kind of the fire of all the emotions and all the thoughts to actually get to a place of quiet, to get to the inner truth? Is there a journaling question that you use to help you get in touch with what your inner truth is? Like, how do we start to access that, especially if we're not used to connecting with it?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, it's, having the times to, again, listen to myself and pay attention, and desires in general. It's like always knowing and having, at each time in my path, I've been on one journey where I'm, my unconscious mind is being focused in one direction for a certain goal and then pivot to a different one. In the moments of the pivot, and initially those times they feel very painful, right? Our values are shifting and we expect that it's going to get really hard. And, but for someone who's not aware of the fact that this is happening and it's evolution and, this is a sign that things are changing, it can be very scary and everything else. But to actually just, sit with it. But in those moments for myself, there's always kind of like an aha moment of like, but I've always said I wanted that. Right. Like, and like, when do I think that's ever going to happen? If I don't actually like take action on that now, when? And so in those moments kind of being like, okay, like, I think it's actually time for me to say yes to that thing I've been saying I've been wanting for my entire life and turning towards that. And then again, making that decision to invest in myself, to go after it and getting whatever support I need. And it's just, again, it's science. You ask like, how did I know? But it's just like the understanding how the unconscious mind works. Again, it's just like repetition and just being around that belief system over and over again and studying how, that person thinks and acts and does, and then just doing that same thing. We're going to get that result.
I love that. I love that. And I think one of the things that's so beautiful about what you've shared is just the the willingness to open up to different ways of thinking. And this is what really transformed so much for me in my life, because my ego was so tied up in like, I'm right. Like, and I was right about things I didn't actually want to be right about. Right. I was like, I'm right. Like vision boarding doesn't work. What else would I say? Like hypnosis works for everyone else, but not for me. I can only make a certain amount of money. And ego was, I mean, it was ego. And when I started opening up to so much of what you've shared beautifully today, which is like, you know, maybe there's another way of thinking. Let me look and see, how does somebody else think? I've talked with, you know, the group yesterday on the call about board of advisors, right? So I've got my board of advisors here that I really admire the results and ways of being certain people have. And I ask myself, like, how do they think? How would they approach this? And I think you really embody that approach as well. There's so many other questions I want to ask, but I want to make sure we have time I want to make the business application here for someone who's listening. And then I'd love to speak a little bit about your experience in our programs as well. So in terms of the business side of this, how have things transformed in your approach to business with kind of taking the same approach to emotional mastery, subconscious work? Like what has the experience and the shift been for you in your business? Let's start there.
Yeah. Well, initially that, decision of being like, no, I don't want to put my time, energy, and focus into being perfect on a diet plan anymore. Plus it's not, in alignment for me to believe that I'm a food addict anymore. So it's like, let me get support in that area so I can at least, as I'm, healing from that, have that support, and then I can focus, on something else. So then hiring that business coach, I knew intuitively that the next thing I needed, I had a business coach prior. I've had many business coaches, but that sales was like what I really needed to work on. So, and then every single time that I get clarity on what that next step is for myself, it's like, boom, it just shows up. Like it just comes in every single time. And so, the journey, it starts with that decision and then kind of like seeing what shows up. Prior to my finding She Sells, it was like for several months, it was like, I want a mastermind full of women, and I want to, I got the structure and the strategy and the sales and whatever, but my experience is not that of, a millionaire, and it's not getting me there. Something's missing. So then getting that it was really around the same stuff that I was doing with Food, Body, and Weight of like, okay, I got to really look at my relationship with food and look at the negative thoughts that I'm thinking, and, the perfectionism that's coming up here, and, really just go to work in the same way on that to get the breakthrough in that regard as well.
And I think what you shared is so powerful when you, the word that's showing up for some reason, I'm just going to use it, is attune. When you attune yourself to your desires and you really work on like clearing out some of that clutter, like you've talked about doing, you do become almost this magnet for whatever you need next is going to be put in front of you. I know I have that experience all the time too, and it's so much fun. So let's speak for just a moment about your experience in the She Sells community and in the mastermind. I think you embody so much of what we, just like the type of woman we love to serve and support. And you and I connected, last October? Was that when I think it was October is when we began together.
Right.
So,
Can't remember.
Oh my gosh. It's like, it doesn't feel like that long ago, but I think it was. Tell me a little bit about like what brought you to the community and what resonated with you about becoming a part of it.
Yeah, definitely. And what I wanted to also add that's, on the same note is, I'm very intuitive. So it's also like feeling into. So in any coaching container that I'm in, it's like, I'm always feeling into like, is there still expansion? Is there still value? Am I still growing here? Right. And, getting to those points. And so for anyone listening, it's like, I just heard a Dr. Joe talk, I think this morning, talking about this of like, when we can let go of all like the thinking about it and the analyzing, and you're just in the feeling of like, how does this energy feel? How does this energy feel? Right. I always know with any coach, like, okay, how does this energy feel? No, there's still more. Okay, keep going. So in the previous business coaching containers, then it was just like, I had been with them, I think 3 years, and just kept tapping into that. And it was just like, I just had this sense of like, okay, kind of like not going anywhere anymore. And so, okay. And then I'm asking myself those questions kind of right away of like, well, what is next? And what energy do I want to feel? And what feels like it is missing in my life right now? And then just getting really clear on that. So like I was saying is like, and then for anyone who knows anything about human design, I'm a projector. So a lot of times the way things come in is just like through invitation to me. And I've kind of learned to trust that. Like, I don't really go out. I'm not designed to really go out and look for something. It's like when it comes to me in some way. So Johanna White, who has been on your podcast, sent me a voice memo one day and she's like, I just feel like you should connect with this. And then had the conversation with you. And it was every, thing that I had been, manifesting and looking for several months. So everything was in alignment. And I've kind of just learned that. And for a decade now or longer, it's like every time that I'm ready for something, the teacher appears. Like, so I've just learned to really trust that. And I wish for everyone that they could trust that, because I have a lot of people will be like, well, how do I know that this is the right thing? And it's like, does this have everything that you've been saying that you want to have in your life? And if it is, like, how can you just trust it and go? Like, as a coach, it's like our job is to, people live their life as someday, one day. And it's like, it's literally being offered to you right here, and like the best, like taking no action is the worst. Like, just takes any action, you make any investment, you make any decision, right? You're going to be light years, ahead. And again, that goes in line with trusting yourself, but it's never led me astray.
Yeah.
And grateful that I found you and She Sells, because it was definitely in alignment.
Yeah. Well, we love having you. What would you say, what shifted most for you as a result of being here and being part of the community in the program?
Definitely the trusting self aspect, and giving myself permission to feel good in my own business. When you had the guest speaker, Gina DeVee, right? Sometimes I get her name wrong. Come on. And she was saying what got me from 6 figures to 7 figures was not structure or strategy or whatever. It was really consciousness and spirituality and raising my vibration. And she mentioned how she never worked on weekends and never worked after 6 o'clock. And it was like, okay. And I took that on and I faced a lot, of fears and pain, and right. Cause it's the same thing as when you go away from the diet mentality. It's like, oh my God, that safety structure is being taken away. Right. But again, it's like, okay, like, let's allow these painful things to come up, because on the other side of that, and, without mentorship, then it's easy to fall back and say, no, put in all those structures again, because, we just get freaked out, which is what happens when people try to do intuitive eating on their own. They're like, okay, I think I feel good enough. Let me eat whatever I want. Then they get freaked out and they're like, no, going back to the diet. Right. So it's like, again, another reason I want to make sure you have support. So like your coach can say like, oop, are you going back? Like, stay the course.
Yeah.
So yes, that has been the biggest takeaway for sure so far.
Yeah, that's so powerful. It really is. I think when we can learn to blend the masculine and feminine energy of our businesses or our sales and learn to, it's like, we need we need structures in place to support us. That's the masculine, but then to really, especially for us as women, learn that, and for men as well, when we tap into that feminine energy of creation and flow and receiving and inspiration and allow that to lead, it shifts everything, not just in our experience of it, which is actually really beautiful in what we're going for, but also in our results as well. So
yes.
This has been so powerful. I went longer than I normally do on interviews. Like, I love this, and I could ask you probably 10 more questions. So we'll have to have you back. I would love that.
Love to.
Tell everyone, Leslie, if someone is listening and they're like, okay, she spoke to me on this. I need to connect with this woman and find out more about working with her and about her community. What are the best ways that someone can get in touch with you?
Yeah. Well, first thing, you can start listening to our podcast. So Hypnosis for Permanent Weight Loss. We just hit 200 episodes. So lots of great content. Woohoo. There for you.
It's a milestone. Yeah.
And then just this past winter, we came out with our first book. So anyone is welcome to go and grab a copy of that. I believe it's still free, if not 99 cents, but I can get that at hpwl.info/ebook. And at the end of the ebook, there's guided meditation tracks for food, body, and weight stuff, and a whole bunch of other resources, along with just actual practical tips for how you can start using the emotional mastery today. to kind of get a feel for how to feel safe enough to feel through the emotions and get the results that we're talking about today.
That's so beautiful. Wow. You're incredible. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everything you shared, for being, not just a part of our community, but also just a leader of how to take these really important principles and use them to transform whatever area of your life is most important to you right now. And I really do encourage everyone listening to go connect with Leslie, get the ebook, listen to the podcast. She practices what she preaches, and she's a phenomenal transformational leader. So Leslie, thank you again. This has been so, so, so much fun.
Thank you so much, Elise. It's been great talking with you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. To you, my listener, go connect with Leslie. And as always, thank you so much for being a part of our community. Thank you for listening to She Sells Radio, and we'll see you on our next episode. Bye for now.